Hello and welcome back to another World of Warcraft Warlords of Draenor video. This time it's going to be about healing. There was a recent blog post that covers healing, health pools, and one or two more things. Now, if you are not a healer, this stuff still pertains to you because you're going to be playing this game with healers. So it's certainly going to be worthwhile understanding a number of the key changes and philosophy, changes that they will be making in Warlords of Draenor. Now, before coming to any conclusions, please be sure to listen to the section of this video which covers developer tweets. That should actually address a few of your concerns about, well, some people think that this may go back to a Cataclysm model. They have said multiple times over Twitter that that is absolutely not what they want to do and that they understand the key flaws of the early Cataclysm healing model. Anyway, with all that said, let's move into the actual blog post itself. Now, the first, half of this video will be me reiterating what Blizzard have said and giving you a full-on, just a sort of a nice rundown with all the information, and then I'll talk a little bit about my own personal thoughts at the end. So the first topic is health and resilience. Now, they will be planning a few different changes that will, in combination with each other, provide a better tuned healing experience in player versus player content. They said that the higher amount of base resilience and battle fatigue basically made characters feel rather weak in player versus player in comparison to how they feel in player versus environment content, so they want to address this problem by shrinking the gap between the two as much as possible, and they're actually doing this in a rather interesting way. They're going to increase player survivability against other players by essentially doubling players' health post-squish. Now, of course, the player, the PvE mob damage will be higher to compensate for this, but overall this should have the effect of making attacks knock off less damage from other players in player versus player, but still not affect PvE in any way. So this doubling of player health would have allowed them to just reduce the amount of resilience and battle fatigue that are in the game. But their goal is actually to remove them entirely, and they're going to do this by reducing PvP spike damage and critical heals. And they're going to do this by making it so that instead of doing 200% normal damage or healing, they will only do 150% normal damage and healing within a PvP context. So overall, what's this going to mean? Well, instead of it feeling like you're being constantly nerfed to kind of undo any power gains that you would get from tier to tier, player versus player weapon damage should scale with health in a way that just it sort of maintains that feeling of player power progression and lessens the disparity between PvP and PvE. Overall, I actually think it's very good. Okay, so next we have probably the largest topic in their blog, and it is the overall retuning of healing spells. So, first of all, they want to tone down the amount of raw throughput that healers have relative to the size of player health pools. Currently, as everyone gets better gear, the percentage health value restored by a heal increases quite a lot. This means that healers are able to refill people's health pools so fast that Blizzard are having to make boss fights more and more bursty in order to provide a challenge for healers. They would prefer it if players were actually spending more time below full health without feeling as if healers are letting them down. They also think that healer gameplay would be more interesting if your allies were in this constant state of not being at full health, rather than just getting them hit extremely hard and then having the healers scramble them back up to 100% HP. So hopefully the challenge will be in maintaining your raid's health at a decent level and healing intelligently, rather than just instant bursting everyone up to 100%, because, well, basically healing has in many cases turned into a game of reaction times, and this is something that Blizzard directly wanted to combat. So next they said that to do this they are going to buff heals less than they are increasing creature damage. What this means is that heals will be less potent in comparison to health pools before the squish. Then, as gear scales, both healer throughput and health pool size will increase at a rather similar rate. This means that the relative power should remain roughly the same. And of course, they are going to be designing counters around this, so do not apply this model to the current feeling of healing in Siege of Orgrimmar or Throne of Thunder. They also said that it's really important to note that some of these spells that are based on healing for a total percentage of a player's health are, well, going to be a little bit different. So if they had have not changed them, then they would have been buffed because of the increased player health. So what they're actually going to do is reduce those percentages, and this may appear as if it's a nerf, but the net result is that their change from power from Mists of Pandaria to Warlords of Draenor will be the exact same as it is for any other healing spell. Okay, so they're also going to be changing absorbs a little bit. They'll be toning down the power of absorbs overall, as they feel that they were getting just a bit too strong, and in some cases, were basically just replacing direct healing damage instead of supplementing it. They of course will be extremely careful with specs that use a lot of absorbs, such as Disciplined Priests, so don't worry about being gimped just because you use a lot of absorbs, that won't happen. Alright, so another thing that they will be looking at is smart heals. So they want healers to care about what they target, because they feel that that would make healer gameplay a little bit more interactive and fun. It certainly would increase the weight behind decision making. They're going to be reducing the number of passive and auto-target heals, and then they're going to make some of the smart heals a little bit less smart. They will now randomly pick out any injured target rather than picking out the most injured targets, but it will of course still pick players over pets. Now that final change there about the smart heals is perhaps kind of controversial and interesting, but right now a smart heal is in some cases just the perfect button, because instead of you having to worry about what players will be healed, you just have to hit the button and let the game take care of it for you. That does take away decisions, though by not picking those injured players, this still means that in a mass AoE heal context, when you just need to lay down the smart heals, they're still going to be useful, so hopefully they won't be as massively useful across the board. However, in their own unique niches, they will still have their place. Alright, so next they wanted to strike a better balance between single and multi-target heals. Multi-target heals will, in many cases, have their mana efficiency reduced, usually by reducing the amount of health that they heal. Basically, they want players to only really use multi-target heals in the situation where it would heal 2 or more players without doing any more overhealing. If it were to hit 2 players and maybe heal up one of them fine but overheal the other, then ideally it should have been more efficient to use a single target heal. This will create more interesting decisions throughout the game, and just hopefully that choice between using a single or multi-target heal will actually matter a bit more. Then finally they are going to be removing the low throughput spells, low throughput and low cost spells like Nourish, Holy Light, and Healing Wave. They feel that these do add complexity to healing, but they don't really add depth. They did say though that there will be some renaming, so for example, Greater Healing Wave will now just be called Healing Wave. They still want healers to be thinking about their mana when deciding what spell to use, so the mana costs and throughput rates of many spells are being altered to give players choice between using a spell with low throughput, low cost, or one with high throughput, high cost. And then they gave us some examples. So for druids, you will have some efficiency spells. These are going to be Healing Touch, Rejuvenation, and Effervescence. Or Effervescence, whatever. Then your high throughput spells will be Regrowth and Wild Growth. For monks, the efficiency spells will be Soothing Mist and Renewing Mist, and the throughput ones will be Surging Mist and Spinning Crane Kick. For the paladins, your higher efficiency spells will be Holy Light, Holy Shock, Word of Glory, and Light of Dawn, and then the high throughput spells will be Flash of Light and Holy Radiance. Then for the priests, your high efficiency spells will be Circle of Healing, Greater Heal, Prayer of Mending, Holy Nova, and they have here in brackets a new discipline only version, which is interesting, and then Penance. And then the high throughput priest spells will be Flash Heal and Prayer of Healing. Then finally for the shamans, they said that the efficiency spells will be Healing Wave, Riptide, and Healing Rain, and that the throughput spells will be Healing Surge and Chain Heal. Next, they also noted that some of their discussion will cause healers to worry about mana regeneration and mana pools. I think this is specifically in relation to the Cataclysm problem. To combat this, they said that they will be increasing base mana regeneration a great deal at early levels, and then have it scale up less at higher item levels. That's item levels I'm talking about, not player character levels. This will make all of the changes sort of play even in both early content, like the first tier, and then in late content, like the final tier. Basically, mana efficiency will stay relevant throughout the whole time, but it won't be as punishing as it was in Cataclysm, not by any stretch of the imagination. In Mists of Pandaria, as we got better gear, it could be argued that healing got less interesting unless you were really pushing the limits by doing things like raiding with one less healer. because mana efficiency just went out the window. You didn't need to care in a lot of cases. They also said that they are confident that they can apply what they've learned from the previous expansions to make this a more dynamic, engaging, non-punishing, and fun healing experience. So hopefully they're right with that one. Then the final thing they talked about was instant casts. So they said that as the game has went on, healers have got more and more in the way of instant cast spells, and that this really removes the intended cost that movement has in the game, and then also limits players' ability to counter healing in player versus player combat. It means that silences and crowd controls are really the only way to shut down healing. Basically, if you can instant cast, then there's no drawback, and there's not really as much of a decision there. It's something that you will just always do. So they are going to be keeping instant heal spells, but they will be reducing the overall number and then doing a whole bunch of tweaking. Here are some examples. So for druids, Wild Growth is now a 1.5 second cast. For monks, Uplift is now a 1.5 second cast. For paladins, both Eternal Flame and Word of Glory have now got 1.5 second casts when spec'd into Holy, and Light of Dawn also has a 1.5 second cast. Then for priests, Cascade, Divine Star, and Halo will have 1.5 second casts, as will Prayer of Mending. So this is interesting actually. They said that it will provide more gameplay, that it's kind of like consistent between player versus player and player versus environment, and that it should hopefully make the combat feel a little bit more like a back and forth dynamic system. So there we go. Finally, they did stress at the end of the blog that this is really just a part of a larger puzzle. These changes are not going to happen in isolation. Boss damage will be different, health pools will be different, item scaling will be different, and PvP will be different. We are just going to have to wait until the expansion's beta to see how these changes exactly play out. So next, the next part of this video is going to be Twitter. And Twitter is very important. Watcher is, well, in real life, Ian Hazacostas. He's the main encounter designer, and he has been tweeting quite a lot about these changes. And I think that his perspective is certainly extremely important to be aware of, so that's why I'm covering it. The most interesting tweet is how they're actually going to be replacing reaction time based healing with decision making based healing. This should provide a lot more depth to the combat, rather than having to do some sort of perfect 180, triple kill, no scope through a wall, crazy reaction time heal. The game will actually be challenging you by rewarding the healers who make the correct choices, not necessarily the split second fastest ones. Though of course you will do extremely well if you're able to combine both of those and make the perfect choice extremely fast all the time. Now, Ian also said that it isn't really ideal when a player can, a healer can heal a player from nearly no health to full health in a matter of seconds. This means that if a boss challenge, or a boss fight mechanic is going to challenge a healer, it will need to attempt to kill other players before the healer can react. This is really just a weird arms race escalation kind of thing that doesn't result in good gameplay. Okay, the odd kind of scare is fine, but when all of the challenging healing mechanics are based on just having to hit a button really fast, and perhaps not that button being the exact, right button to hit, or really just, it's about hitting the buttons quickly, not exactly making the best choice, and that's not really interesting gameplay. That's just, it's kind of crap. So it's definitely nice that they've identified that problem and that they will be moving on and trying to fix it. Then he also said that exceptionally skilled healers will be able to distinguish themselves a bit more than in Mists of Pandaria, but they are being very, very careful to avoid the early pitfalls of the Cataclysm model, because the Cataclysm model was, it just wasn't that great. Basically, it was a mix of low mana regen and overtuning, in the opinion of Ian. Then finally, he said that he totally understands people's problems with Cataclysm healing, because the guy was just getting spammed with people saying, oh no, Cataclysm healing's coming back, and that basically, he just said, this problem is not going to happen again. He said that the core problem was high damage and then the weak regen while in blues, and that the healing model did feel better in epics by patch 5.2, but really, by that time, the damage was done and people were soured to the system. Alright, so that is pretty much the whole shebang in terms of the blog, but do keep on watching, well, if you want my opinions for whatever they're worth, keep watching, and if not, then you can just turn off the video, and thank you for stopping by. So, what do I think? Well, overall, I think this is quite good. As a gamer, I generally prefer decision-making based gameplay over Twitch gameplay. That's why I enjoy MMOs, I enjoy a lot of strategy games, and things like that, and even in shooters, I don't do well because I'm great at hitting someone in the head instantly. I do well in shooters because I outmaneuver people and I make really good decisions in combat, so hopefully if they can emphasize these aspects of healing, it should turn out quite well. You know, it's funny, looking at the comments of the blog post, it's just the usual QQ fest based on incomplete information, and that kind of thing. Really, what you should take away from this is design philosophy, and then the multiple times at which they have tried to allay concerns of the Cataclysm healing model coming back. Okay, so what do I think of the general retuning? Well, I think that as Mists of Pandaria went on, healing probably got less interesting. This is something that I've heard a lot of healers talk about, and by the way, I'm not a healer myself, but of course it's still of interest to me because it's the game I play, and obviously I play the game with healers. I have healed a little bit in both Wrath of the Lich King and parts of Mists of Pandaria, though it really just wasn't my thing in comparison to doing DPS. So what these changes should do is they'll make it so that as the expansion goes on, healing should remain constantly challenging and fun. The tweaks to the spells appear to be focused on emphasizing important and interesting decisions, so this should translate to things being less spammy and more intelligent, so the skilled healer should really prevail. And actually, I'm feeling a little bit more kind of jazzed for healing, honestly, now that I've heard about all this. It's, you know, I think decision-making can be really fun, and it can be very rewarding when you do it right, so if they really nail the system, it could be quite good. Now, I think smart heals are odd, and they involve clicking a button, which will then have the game make decisions for you. And as Sid Meier said, a game is a series of interesting choices. Well, it's taking away a bit of a choice there, and I don't think that it was great game design, so it's good that they are going to be retuned. Now sure, there are times when they do have a place, but I think that by making them distribute their healing perfectly in Mists, it just made them too good for too much of the time. It de-emphasized using traditional healing methods in an efficient manner. Instead, you just hit the button which has the game do it for you, especially at higher gear levels and things like that. So again, I think this newfound emphasis on using your other heals should be good for gameplay. Then also in terms of mana, it seems like they want you to constantly keep, they want you to keep an eye on it and emphasize efficiency, but certainly not to the degree of Cataclysm healing. And of course, one of the major steps to prevent that is by having base mana regen be very high at the start of the expansion, even at level 100, which means that even if you are running around in blues, you will still have a very good mana pool to work with that regenerates nicely. So it won't be like Cataclysm. It also appears that most of the gameplay is going to come from looking at your team's health and then figuring out the correct way to heal them up. Maybe not the easiest or, I guess, just most spammy way, but the most intelligent way. And then since the fights will be less bursty and players will spend more time under full health, the actual job of maintaining the raid's HP should require more brain power and more decision making. This means that the base healing that you are doing every basically second should be more interesting. It's not going to be that, you know, you're just sitting there doing the odd smart heal to keep your raid, or at least most of your raid, topped off. And that's definitely a good thing to hear. Then I also agree with their point that instant casts were kind of a bad thing in PvP, so it's definitely nice that they are being toned down. This will emphasize movement and positioning a bit more in fights, which should nudge up the skill cap, which I think is a good thing. Of course, you always want to nudge up the skill cap while not making things ultra punishing at the low end, and it does sound like they're going to be doing that, especially with the mana regen increase, which, yeah, should help things out. Then also, I think that PvP overall should benefit from this health pool tweak. I think it's actually a rather clever way of doing it, and it should remove a lot of the problems that the ultra high resilience brings. So overall, this sounds very good to me, but if you are mainly a healer, what do you think? If I get enough good responses to this video from healers, I may do a reply or response video in which I highlight some of the good points that people made. So whether that video happens entirely depends on people leaving what they think in the comments. But that's really it. Overall, I think it's interesting, and I would like to see more. So, if you enjoyed the video, if you would consider checking out my social media, liking, subscribing, my Patreon page, all those different things, it would be very cool. But for now, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.